Welcome to SFC Next, a series of conversations that we at Sustainable Furnishings Council have put together to help home furnishings companies think smarter about sustainability. And also, we hope these conversations will help consumers find the information and the products that they need to furnish their homes in a manner that is resource efficient and healthy. I am Susan Ingalls, and I direct Sustainable Furnishings Council. Sustainable Furnishings Council is a membership organization in the home furnishings industry. Our members are companies that are involved in furnishing homes. So they're companies that supply materials that go into furniture products. They're companies that make furniture and accessories and other things that we put in our homes. And they're companies that sell these sorts of products in furniture stores, and also interior designers who specify these sorts of products for residential as well as commercial projects. So we are a membership organization that includes all these kinds of companies, and also, importantly, includes nonprofit organizations, conservation organizations, including World Wildlife Fund. We are broadcasting on air today from the headquarters of World Wildlife in Washington, D.C., and we thank World Wildlife very much for being our host for these conversations. We have other sponsors of this series of conversations that we also want to thank, and those include Belfort Furniture, Home Trends and Design, Surya, Libico, New York Now Artisan Resources, Crescent Fine Furnishings, Vaughn Bassett. A wonderful group of companies have come together, all of the member companies in our organization, to help bring this series of conversations to you. We invite you to join us, to get involved with us. We are delighted to invite into our membership any company that has a commitment to sustainability, whatever that means to them, a commitment to transparency, and a commitment to continuous improvement. We make it our business to help these companies realize their own commitment. So we provide a lot of guidance, we provide resources, we provide education, and we provide marketing support for those companies that qualify. And when a company qualifies by implementing a large number of the best practices that we have identified, we recognize those companies as exemplary. And we have with us on this conversation a couple of our exemplary members, including a company called Gat Creek and a company called Copeland Furniture. And there are probably others. All of you can send in your comments and questions by Twitter or by Google Chat. So I think that gives you an overview of what we are doing now, and I'd like to start the conversation of this hour. So we are privileged this hour to have with us Mike Italiano, who is the CEO of the Institute for Market Transformation to Sustainability. And Mike is going to be talking with us this hour about how the exploding green building market will affect demand for certified sustainable products. I want to tell you all a little bit about Mike. Mike is not only CEO of Market Transformation to Sustainability and of the Capital Markets Partnership, which is going to be a lot of what we're going to be hearing about today, and I'm real excited about that. He is also a founder of the U.S. Green Building Council. We are in a building that is a LEED certified building. This whole program of LEED certification exists thanks to you, Mike. And our organization exists thanks to you. You served on our founding board and have remained a great asset to us and a great friend to us as we've grown since your board involvement. So other things that Mike has been involved with: risk-based corrective action, leadership, the Risk-Based Corrective Action Leadership Council. We already have identified you as a significant leader. The ASTM International Committee on Environmental Assessment. You remain a director of USGBC and CEO of the board, having been a CEO of the board, and you remain involved with the International Design Center for the Environment. So we really, really appreciate your bringing your expertise to us, and I'm eager for you to tell us during part of this conversation more about SMART certification. This is a sustainable product standard that we at Sustainable Furnishings Council embraced immediately, and it will be interesting for those in this conversation to hear a bit more about that too. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Susan. Delighted to be here. It's always great to work with you, and your enthusiasm is very addicting, and I try to use it as much as I can. I wanted to update everyone on, in addition to SMART, which is Lead for Products, and was an important step, I think, in the council's moving forward on identifying what are sustainable home furnishings. But I wanted to also talk about what the capital markets impact is going to be on sustainable furnishings. And it's a lot of issues and activities that are way beyond what the council does, but they're starting to have a big impact right now. So the three things I wanted to cover briefly. One is what's the latest doom and gloom on climate change, which is important because it's driving the market. We have therapy sessions for people that need them afterwards.
Thank you.
Also, hope, optimism, and major bucks, which is what we see happening. And then what does this mean for the council members? In terms of where we are with climate change, things are getting very serious now in terms of damages. Standard & Poor's downgraded a number of sovereign nations just recently. We've had a double whammy for cities. Zurich and Farmers Insurance just sued 200 cities for climate damages. And also, the insurance industry is backing away from coverage. Just the litigation costs, which they have a duty to defend their insurance, could put them out of business. And I think that's what's driving these suits. Also, which is troubling, is that, just for an example, one of our major global insurance company members was asked by California cities, can you help us with this flooding that's increasing because of intense climate change? And they said, it's not insurable. So these are substantial issues that are impacting the market, impacting investors, making the capital markets more of a player in terms of solutions. Most recently, the U.S. Climate Assessment Program documented that there are these damages going on in the United States, which are global. We've documented in Wall Street Due Diligence released to the New York Stock Exchange that these damages exist. We've updated that. We've also documented that the capital markets can stimulate the economy with $1 trillion private sector stimulus. Also that certified sustainable products and green buildings, including FSC, including SMART, including Furnishings Council exemplary standard, are more profitable, less risky, preferred by investors. We also find that if we don't move real fast, and the investors know this, including our most recent updated due diligence, that we can have permanent, irreversible, unmanageable climate change. JP Morgan just recently reported on that as a black swan, high probability statistical event. We also know that if we continue business as usual, that this could lead to financial contagion, which is what we experienced with the credit crisis, why things got out of control. So that's enough to motivate people. Now, how do we? What's happening in the market that's making this relevant for the Furnishings Council and to manufacturers and retailers? We have underwriting standards that identify and measure what the increased cash flow is for your manufacturing members and the retailers, and that's important. So we know from companies that are exemplary members, we can tell them how that increases their profitability. That was part of the Wall Street due diligence released at the New York Stock Exchange. We're also amending our green building and sustainable manufacturing underwriting standards to include resiliency. In other words, how do we adapt to climate change? And infrastructure, which is a very important part, very critical. In Sandy, for example, we had infrastructure failures. We're releasing those standards at a national public meeting in the American Institute of Architects, and also launching green building bonds. The markets have recently devalued coal. This is a big step, and was announced by the Republican governor of Wyoming, a very big coal state, said, and this is the first, we need to start working on climate solutions. We also have a nascent but very vigorous $20 billion green bond market. And this is, the home markets is moving into that. And all of these issuances have been sold out immediately. So in other words, investors want it, there's not enough. There was a $750 million green building bond recently that oversubscribed, sold out in 2 hours.
Wow.
We also are working with the rating agencies because with these bonds, credit rating agencies, they rate governments, they rate publicly traded companies, they rate bonds, AA, AAA, et cetera, single A. We're working with them on higher credit ratings and have meetings scheduled in the next couple of weeks. There's a $100 million green home bond. This is new construction, which we've already pre-sold to investors in 2 weeks because of this demand. And this identifies, and there are also green retrofit bonds that we announced with Citi and with the states. So the homes market is really going first, even though the green building market for commercial has been a faster market in terms of sustainability. Now that bond will have a very big competitive impact because the other builders are going to have to do the same because it's providing so much value. It's going to increase share value. It's going to include certified sustainable products, including smart, exemplary council products. It will also address the illegally logged wood issue. So it will be legally logged wood. It will have the defenses to liability for Lacey, which is very important. And we also believe, and we calculated in our due diligence, that these bonds are very replicable, easily to repeat. We think within 5 years there'll be thousands of them. They open up 30-year profitable business models for investors, as well as the building industry, the world's largest. And we can easily provide the $2 trillion we need to retrofit the building stock to reduce about 18 gigatons of carbon pollution to prevent irreversibility. So these are extremely important things that the building industry uniquely is having a solution to. Now, most importantly for the council and our members, we see this as ending the greenwash, what I call wall of forever. I don't know if you've watched Cosmos on TV recently, but one of the things they just showed was they have radio telescopes looking way out into the universe, farther than anything else, and it goes back to purportedly when the Big Bang started, but they can't go beyond that, and they call that the wall of forever. So I think we're in the greenwash wall of forever right now, and this is a real stumbling block to progress, to the market commercializing this. So what does this mean for the council members? I think this is very important, and I think if I were a manufacturer or if I were a retailer, I would have very positive information on and explain what my carbon footprint is and how I'm reducing that. You know, that's going to become something under very extreme scrutiny. I also would have credible third-party certifications to consensus metrics because the market doesn't believe corporate self-promotion on the environment because of all the greenwashing. And it needs to be a credible standard that goes beyond the status quo because obviously with these constraints on climate change, there's no market demand for the status quo. I would avoid greenwash traps like the plague. The environmental groups have organized, Greenwash Action has just been created with Greenpeace and the Sierra Club, and they're starting active campaigns in the green building industry. That's a real brand destroyer. So, but it shows, how the market is saying, we don't want this. Now, greenwash also is unlawful, so it's not something that people need to. It's something we need to avoid. I think it's important too, if I'm a manufacturer or retailer, to know, okay, why does SFC exemplar, FSC certification, SMART, why does that increase my profitability? Well, we know from companies that it really drives down your operating costs. That's number one. And we actually have companies that have documented that. We released that at the New York Stock Exchange. It shows their profitability, their increased share value. So these are really important things for, obviously, for-profit companies and nonprofits that are working with it. And we know also from, looking at all the value, looking at how environmental issues improve share value, GE's Eco-Imagination, for example, when that was launched, it increased their share value by about $5 billion. So we know these publicly traded companies that are issuing green home bonds, they're going to see a spike in their share value. If you're an officer and a shareholder, that's money in your pocket. Ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, this is what motivates people. And this is where we see SFC next. So thanks for being here, and it's my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that excellent overview. I want to remind our viewers that you can send in questions by Google Chat or by Twitter using the handle hashtag SFCnext. So, Mike, what do you think is the most important next step for furnishings retailers to take? So these stores that are selling furniture products, should they be friends with their local chapter of USGBC so that they know the local developers who are going to be specifying sustainable product for the homes they're developing, perhaps?
That's a very good idea. I think another idea, too, which we've seen is key to leading companies, early adopters in this market, really increasing their profits, is understanding the brand value that affiliating with the council, having exemplary membership, what that does, and marketing that. There's been a lot of confusion on, what consumers think about sustainability. Some of it intentional by folks that want to steer the market in one direction. But all the environmental surveys, going back 20, 30 years, people want these kind of products. People are biological creatures. We want clean air. We want clean water. And if you give them a label they trust, they're going to respond favorably. And we're seeing now that cost also may not be a barrier, and people will pay more in certain markets, organic products, for example. So I think understanding that here you have a standard, you have an organization that is independent third-party certification, goes beyond the status quo, and is consensus. In other words, there was democracy, people participated in it, so therefore you can commercialize it in the market, you avoid antitrust issues. That having like co-branding with an organization like the council is really going to increase your sales. And that's something I see a lot of retailers and manufacturers not really understanding, because it is complicated, but we've seen the companies that do that. They've really seen tremendous rewards in their sales, and market share, their brand, loyalty with customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have seen that too, that when a company is offering more, such as offering some product that has a verifiable eco story to it, consumers think more of the company.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Another thing that I think fits with your comment about organic food is that we are finding that consumers are more and more interested in products that are going to last a long time. They want value for whatever investment they're making, whether they're buying a very expensive piece of furniture or a more mid-priced piece of furniture. They do want value,
right.
And a significant part of that value is durability and non-toxicity.
That's correct. That's the biggest fear of consumers. The biggest fear initially and still today is the green product, the sustainable product isn't going to work as well as the conventional product. For that reason, with the SMART standard, which is LEED for products, we have prerequisites for durability. We give added credit for extended product life. There are prerequisites for toxicity. And so these are things that were very important. They went through a very rigorous, many-year consensus process. So there's a lot of R&D and market testing and real value that gives the consumer a label that they can trust and want. And it's simple. They want simple. They want something they can trust, and they want to know that this is better than the conventional product.
Last night we saw the film Toxic Hot Seat. So many of us have toxins in our homes, sort of top of mind this morning. So talk a little bit about how in developing the SMART standard, you made consideration for how the heck you define these toxins and make sure they're not in the product.
Well, there was a lot of work that was done beforehand, and we relied on that. So, for example, and this is included in life cycle assessment too, looking at the product from raw materials extraction, transportation, manufacturing, what happens when it's in the building, and then once it doesn't work, does it go to a landfill or get reused? There's about 4,000 well-known toxic chemicals that EPA has identified, along with UNEP, the United Nations, and the Society for Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry. Those are required to be inventoried in SMART. Plus, we also do not certify any products that have Stockholm and Rotterdam toxic treated chemicals. And we also have a carcinogen policy, which looks at carcinogens, mutagens, and teratogens. And those are baseline issues that we have to work with. Now, we do have, just like with FSC certified wood, stepwise approaches to help companies move through that. So it's very reasonable. It's more value you're ever going to see from a regulator. I can guarantee that. But those are very important, and they're a combination of prerequisites and also additional credits. We just worked with Perkins & Will, for example, a large global design firm, and Perkins & Will issued a white paper on toxicity in life cycle assessment environmental product declarations that's in the LEED v4 version. We came up with, as a result of that, a transparency label for life cycle assessments, environmental product declarations, and companies are using that. So it's a simple label on the cover that meets the FTC Environmental Marketing Guides, Truth in Advertising. And it's simple to see, okay, yeah, this is something I can trust, and where you don't have a label, I think people are going to start asking questions.
I think you're right. And one of the questions we get often is about life cycle assessment. A life cycle assessment is a rather complex thing. It does track the life of a product, as you said, from when the raw materials are extracted, through the processing of those materials, through the manufacturing of a product, the distribution of the product, the use of it, the reuse of it, until what do you have at the end? Something that will be recycled, or something that will rot and that way be recycled into dirt, or something that is toxic waste. One of the interesting things that about life cycle assessment, being such a big idea that it makes some people, it can be overwhelming.
It is.
It is overwhelming.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting things about life cycle assessment is that when you decide you're going to do one, you decide the scope of it. And this is something that the International Standards Organization decided was an important thing to do. So for an ISO compliant life cycle assessment, you define where you're starting, you define where you're ending, and you do your thorough work in between there. And
that's a start, but ISO also, the standards also allow you to do a life cycle assessment, or LCA as we call it, and ignore toxicity, and ignore key product stages where it may be coming from. So that's a problem. It doesn't go far enough. That's what the Perkins and Will white paper and the transparency label cover, because that's actually a violation of truth in advertising. So life cycle assessment, it's important to keep a perspective on it. You can't compare one product on a level playing field to another like you can with the Council's exemplary standard or SMART, or like you can with LEED one building to another. There's not enough data, but it is important for manufacturers and other folks because it tells you in your supply chain, your suppliers, and it's the only way you can really get supplier data, even though it's not as good as we'd like, so that you can say, these suppliers are not too good. I need to change that. This is how I need to improve my product. So those are real values of life cycle assessment, but it's still not at a point where, like the Council's exemplary standard, where you can, on a level playing field, compare one product to another, one manufacturer, and so that's but it's important to be able to do the LCA to get those key information. And it's an important way of covering the supply chain.
And what we have been privileged to do several life cycle assessments with a professor and his students at Stanford University, and we've been able to build one on the other. We did one about foam, comparing biohybrid foam with pure polyurethane foam. And then we did one on a material that can be used to cover foam when you're making something like a sofa.
Right.
And we're just building from there. And it's I think that's a very useful thing about what we can do with life cycle assessments.
Life cycle thinking is it's really important to think in this way. And just to give you an example, a lot of people think that bio-based products are automatically better for the environment. But when you look at it over the life cycle, you find that unless they're organically produced using best management practices, they're no different than a conventional product. So there's a lot of value in that kind of thinking, and that's incorporated into the SMART standard.
I am noticing, Mike, that there seem to be some attempts to bring questions and comments in. I know that this tool we're using is new to many of us, so it could be that people are sending questions by Twitter, hashtag SFC next, and we haven't received them yet. Keep the questions coming, we will get to them. And if you are on Google+, you can send your questions by Google Chat, I believe. So keep the questions coming, and we will try to mind read until we actually see them coming up on the chat box.
You're good at that, so go ahead.
Let's see. So we talked some about life cycle assessment, and we've talked some about SMART. Here's one thing I wanted to go back to, because we talked about the fact that these, as you said at the beginning of this, when you were talking with us a little bit about climate change and the fact that insurance companies are saying, I just can't insure against the rising sea level because it's going to happen. So we can get overwhelmed. And I love this good news that there is that the green bond market is booming, and that is very good news. And I do think these kinds of investments are going to spur the innovation that we need. One of the things that we need huge innovation around is getting toxins out of our environment, and this is it is a problem that we can be overwhelmed by, partly because we know that for some of these things, nobody knows what we're going to do. Nobody knows what can be done about the fact that these things are, these toxic substances are making their way up the food chain. And so, good idea to stop using them. I wonder whether you see any connection to, I mean, I keep thinking of cleaning up brownfields. That is a good use of, that's a good sort of investment to make. Do you see any work being done on that kind of problem solving around products?
All the tools are there. You know, the SMART standard, for example, you know, balances proprietary information, which is very important, confidentiality, but also has credible limits and very comprehensive evaluation for products and manufacturers so that there's not toxicity impacts. The challenge in what we face in the market is not unusual. It's, you know, how do we eliminate the confusion? And so the capital markets and the investment in the bonds are really important. That you can buy that wallet forever. So the tools that are out there now, there are plenty of tools that are good that can do it. The standards are all there. It's just really us working together and making sure that people are educated and they understand that these standards work best. The U.S. Green Building Council just finally decided that FSC, certified wood, will remain the standard because it's a leadership standard. It goes way beyond. And so, you know, having that kind of consensus in the market and embracing the capital markets that really can enforce that and get rid of this confusion is the way that I think we're going to substantially reduce toxicity. We've had discussions with Wall Street, the big banks, JP Morgan, when we did our stock exchange launch. They want no part of toxicity. One example is if you have toxic products, you're going to, you know, hurt your indoor air. We know that improved indoor air quality increases cash flow for commercial buildings. It accelerates tenant retention and lease up. That's a very important factor. If you go to these greenwash standards and you get a lot of toxicity in the materials, you're going to destroy the indoor air quality. You're going to destroy the value of the building. So the capital markets doesn't want any part of that.
Of course not. Neither do.
And no one wants that if you're in a transparent environment. And one of the things that we've seen is the chemical industry, you know, is fighting change, and a lot of this stuff is happening sub rosa. But continuing open discussions, transparent discussions in the public, you know, they want to move forward quickly on this, and we think that that kind of, you know, further discussion, transparent discussions, transparent decision making is really key to making progress.
We seem to have a question here.
Well, good.
It is hard to read, but it is about communicating to the end user marketplace. So one of the things that you talked about was a label that only goes on products that where the company has said they're being completely transparent about everything that's in that product. Now in furnishings, we've got some complex products. It's complex materials. We have composite wood materials. We've got synthetic fabrics. We've got foams that are made of various components. So we've got some very, very complex materials, and it could be that the asker is wondering if this kind of thing could ever actually make its way to a piece of furniture, unless the furniture is something very, very simple, like a solid wood table that is nothing but one kind of wood.
It does take more time, but the standards we have, including the exemplary standard and the optional credits, really allow for that. I think the question also wanted to address, is there a disconnect in you know, what the valuation is by Wall Street of certain companies and their sustainable performance? And you know, that really hasn't started happening yet with any kind of comprehension. You know, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index is a good start. You know, there's transparency issues there. I mean, when you look at the, what the market really is going to need, though, and we see that in the underwriting standards about how sustainable a company is. The metric that's used is the most sustainable companies are the ones that, make the most, buy the most, and sell the most certified sustainable products. And then when you're looking at a manufacturer and a retailer, that would be the metric. The capital markets and Wall Street are a long way from there.
Yes. I am going to see. I'm going to see whether I'm going to to make an experiment, Mike.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm going to make an experiment. I'm going to go to the conference room that has a few viewers, and I'm going to try to unmute their mic. I'm going to see. I think I can hear that room now, and I would like to ask those sitting around the conference table to ask Mike a question. Let's see how this works. Is there someone in there who, I'm actually not sure that it's working for volume.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Good, good. Tell me, and you all are, as we see you on the screen, are sort of small and anonymous, so there's no need to to worry about anybody knowing who is saying what. But I wonder whether we have any questions or comments from the room about the value of making investments in best practices for sustainability.
Have any manufacturers or retailers thought about that at all, and thought about what would be the first step if you were going to explore that issue more and try to tie it into your profitability? It's a daunting effort, but I think from our experience, and we can refer you to manufacturers that have done this and have actually seen a lot of success.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's one of the best ways. If folks are interested in learning more about that, which is very real, and I think very important, especially where we're going globally in terms of demands on the resources, the priority for sustainability, how that's going to impact companies in the market. Any folks that are interested, we'd be delighted to.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. I think I see a hand.
Hi, I have a question. I worked with the Green Lights and Energy Star buildings on their Green Light program with the EPA, and one of the things we did was the assessments of, yes, here's your investment, but over time, here's how much money you're going to save, which would help them wrap their brain around converting from the old lighting to the newer lighting. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can put a dollar figure or quantify how we can help businesses make the investment for replacing carpeting or furnishings, particularly in public buildings.
Great question. Thank you. Do you have a thought?
Yeah, there are business case calculators for that that are out there in the market for green buildings. A lot of the professionals that help companies get LEED certification do that kind of work. There's nothing yet in the market beyond qualitative data that's being used that goes beyond just an individual building in that project. The underwriting green value scores, which are required, look at any home or any commercial building that's in the bond, and they look primarily at energy efficiency. That's 40% of the score. We know that energy efficiency, and this is true with a manufacturer, that's driving down your operating costs. That really has enormous value. And part of the reason for that is because of rising carbon-based costs. In our due diligence, we looked historically and we saw that carbon-based energy costs were going up 20% a year for the last 10 years. Globally, we see that energy investment bankers have documented that, validated it's going to continue. Also, it measures the increased value of like on-site green power. So if you're a home and you've got solar panels, that's going to lower your operating costs. The underwriting scores and the value that we've documented for green buildings also come from proximity to transit. That's very important. We're seeing that some, getting back into furnishings, we're seeing that some factors have gone from an intangible value to an actual cash flow or expense reduction issue, like LACI compliance. Now we know that Gibson Guitar, almost got destroyed. Their brand was killed in those raids, and that's because it's strict criminal liability. There's very little recourse to court unless you have the defense to liability and the LACI due care standard. Lumber Liquidators, the same thing. So their share value went down, when they first were rated. So we've moved that up from intangibles to tangibles. When you're looking at it as a manufacturer, though, and that's in buildings, when you're looking at a manufacturer in terms of your cash flow or a retailer, those issues are not intangible. Those are very important things. If you're reducing your carbon-based energy, primarily at your manufacturing facility, that's going to give you long-term benefits. There's three things that are making that cost go up, and those are regulatory constraints on carbon. We have new requirements that EPA has just issued for power plants, and there's $40 million that Sierra Club has to shut down coal-fired power plants that Mike Bloomberg gave them. So these things are having an impact on cost. We're also seeing stranded assets with carbon-based energy. So, for example, Exelon Energy in Illinois just decided to shut down 3 nuclear power plants because wind power on the grid was, too cheap. So that's one factor. Another factor is global population growth. There's more demand. So, reducing your carbon footprint is really it's really very important for profitability. The J.P. Morgan folks said, for example, on green buildings, because you're seeing obsolescence risk if you're conventional. It's like having a building without windows or air conditioning. They say if you're retrofitting your building and it's not green, it's like throwing your money away.
Yeah. Well, I would say if you're growing your business without considering these best practices for sustainability, you might be doing the same.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that we're getting close to the end of our time for this conversation. I do think we might have gotten some questions that did not arrive to us, so I want to apologize to our viewers and listeners if that is the case, and I want to assure you that any questions we receive by Twitter or eventually by Google Chat, we will answer, we will respond to, if not in today's conversations, then in the ongoing conversations that you can participate in via webinars that we broadcast every month and other tools on our website, sustainablefurnishings.org. Oh, look, we have one more question. I will take it.
We have one more question. Some of us are troubled about the lack of demeritus in the LEED system. Some research has shown these buildings are actually less efficient than the non-LEED counterparts. Can you comment?
Yeah, that was a chemical industry front article in Fortune. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that's happening now because there's hundreds of billions of dollars of market share at risk. We see disruptive technologies like green buildings moving forward because the market wants it. How many people use the Yellow Pages today?
Yeah.
This is evolution. We're not Luddites. There's a lot of good documentation that LEED buildings on average, and this was in our Wall Street due diligence, reduce energy efficiency by about 40%. But the most important thing is our underwriting standards, where you're going to be looking at these bonds and you're going to be looking at each home and each building. You'll get a score that shows what that energy efficiency is. and it's 40% of the score. So the higher the energy efficiency, whether it's LEED, it's whether some other building or home, that's going to show, and investors will actually see that because it's transparent. So that's where the market's going, and I think that's a very powerful force to drive carbon pollution down, which is what we all need to do now.
Yes, we do indeed. Yeah. Mike, thank you so
My
much
pleasure. This is
for
great.
being with us.
You're very brave at this experiment. I hope it works well.
I do too. Thank you. I hope many of the things that we are working on work well. And
You have to try, though.
You have to try.
Yeah.
You have to try.
Thank
so
you, Susan.
thank you for your
pleasure.
continued effort. Thank you. Thank you for having joined us for this conversation. We have another conversation starting at the top of the hour. Please join us for that one as well. At the top of the hour, we will begin a conversation about wood, and our panelists include Amy Smith of World Wildlife Fund, Mark Kamoli of Rainforest Alliance, and Corey Brinkman of Forest Stewardship Council, and Bob Johnston of Tropical Forest Foundation. So stay tuned for another conversation starting in about 15 minutes. Thank you for your attention.